So for more now, we can bring in Renaud Foucart, Senior Lecturer in Economics at the Lancaster University Management School. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on Around the World today. Now, Sébastien Lecornu, Gérald Darmanin and Laurent Nunez, they're all facing questions today in the National Assembly. What exactly is this Q&A seeking to establish?
I guess seeking to establish responsibilities in front of something that is extremely sad and that is taking everyone is seeing this as a tragedy. And so when you see a tragedy, you want to find out who is responsible. And so there will be several angles through which they will try to find responsibilities. One of them will be trying to find within the judiciary what went wrong. So this is a clear safeguarding issue. Somehow the question was raised, no? So there were cases that were in front of the police, there were cases in front of the judiciary, they could have acted, so why didn't they act? And then from the opposition, there will be something about, is there something else the government could have done? And so clearly here, part of it will be about, is there enough money simply for the justice? Another one will be about the sense of priority. So one of the things you hear a lot about Gérald Darmanin is that they've been sending a lot of requests to the judiciary to give priority to several different things. And so does this amount of priority somehow force them to stop focusing on the most important things, such as safeguarding children?
Now, on Monday, Gérald Darmanin, the Justice Minister, said that he would not be resigning over this affair. Do you think that he's going to be able to survive this political storm?
It's possible. In the Fifth Republic, there is not a lot of tradition of a minister taking responsibilities for that kind of thing. So the closest I could think of is the Outreau affair, which was a very large judiciary mistake of people falsely accusing of being accused, of being part of a pedophile ring. Nobody resigned from the ministry. So that's not necessarily the kind of thing they do, but clearly in terms of standing for a man who was planning to run on a strong law and order platform, possibly as president, this is not very good for him, and he will definitely not be someone seen as the embodiment of law and order for France in the future.
Darmanin has said that the French judiciary will, quote, draw all the consequences from this scandal, although not, it seems, his own resignation. What exactly does that mean? What sorts of reforms possibly can we envisage here?
The first thing will be, as you noticed, blame shifting. So he will want to make it clear that somebody else has to resign. So it will be someone from within the judiciary. Then in terms of reform, you've heard a lot of different things. It's as if everyone is bringing their hobby horse to the discussion. So you heard about we should extend the number of years that sexual offenders pass in jail, which would have done absolutely nothing in this case. And all the rest is about priorities again. But whenever there is something that happened in the public debate, the priorities tend to shift towards that. So in the previous month, people were talking a lot about narco traffic and everyday safety in the streets. And this is the kind of messages that Darmanin was sending. At the time, it was seen somehow as a legitimate priority too. So how do you define priority? Is it going to shift priority in favor of issues like this one? Perhaps, but this seems to me largely reacting to events more than an actual strategy.
In recent days, we've heard French authorities blaming magistrates for some of the past judicial failures. Are magistrates in this case the ideal scapegoat, or do they bear real responsibility for the dysfunction that we've been seeing in the judicial system?
We know only very little right now, but what I think is striking is the attempt at quickly trying to blame the judiciary. So you heard at the very beginning of the affair, Darmanin saying, oh, I had told them that it should be a priority to protect families and children, which is true in a way. It was part of dozens of different priorities sent to the judiciary. So in a way, yes, they were told that it was not a good idea to let a potential sexual offender next to children. You've heard in that story there are clearly basic problems like the little girl who was accusing him previously being forced to live in the same place and having the family moving houses just because the police was not moving. You clearly have a sense that things were not working the right way. But before putting a blame, I think people need to look at how the system works, what were the priorities, and I fear the fact that there seems to be an emergency to quickly put the blame on someone because no one at the political level is interested in taking responsibility.
What then, in your opinion, is the state of the French justice system today? Does it have enough resources? Is it sufficiently well managed?
There is always a question of means. You could always do with more money. So the French judiciary is claiming, and I think they are right, that they are short of funding. Like in general, a lot of public institutions in France, France has a very large public spending. A lot of it goes to finance the pension system. This is increasing. So if you look at the salary of the judges, the salary of the people in the judiciary, a big chunk of that goes to pay pensions. This is going to increase over and over to finance the deficit in pensions. This is a priority you make. You decide you could put more money in the judiciary, you need to take less money. You need to take the money from somewhere else. And so, yes, you could do more with more money. Yes, I'm sure there are always reorganizations that are possible, but you come from several ministers of justice, of interiors, who were running on those law and order platforms, at least since Nicolas Sarkozy, that put that as a priority in the political agenda. But in the end, tragedies will happen. And the question more to me is how can you make sure that responsibilities are not a political game, but that you really try to understand what went wrong and how to possibly do better next time.
Now, alongside the growing political pressure we're seeing, there's also a lot of public pressure. We saw protests across France yesterday, as many as 200 separate demonstrations demanding accountability and also new safeguarding measures. Do you think we're on the cusp of seeing a moment of real reckoning when it comes to how this country deals with child sex offences?
I think this might be an important moment. There have been relatively similar stories in the 90s. You will remember Marc Dutroux in Belgium, Michel Fourniret in France, several high-level political standards of not being harsh enough on pedophilia that have clearly led to an improvement in safeguarding measures. So safeguarding measures around schools, around movements with children are much, much better, much more transparent than they were in the past. There have been, of course, all the abuses in the church that have been covered, that have changed what is allowed or not. When there is a big moment like that, when the public has the feeling that, no, this is something that is not acceptable, clearly, typically, there are changes in what is allowed or not. The suspect, so Jérôme Barella, is someone who has been working in schools, for instance. How was it possible? Could it have been stopped before? Those kind of rules on what is allowed in terms of safeguarding still differ between countries. And so you could expect France to take a much harsher position in the coming months on those specific rules.
You mentioned a number of child sex scandals in the 90s, but this is by no means the only child sex scandal to be rocking France right now. Paris, of course, is still very much reeling from the multiple arrests linked to child sexual assault in the city's preschool network. It increasingly, for those possibly looking at France from outside, looks like France has a major child safeguarding issue. Is there any way we can understand this from a cultural, possibly a historical standpoint?
I think it's kind of dangerous in a way to try to put too much philosophical discourse behind that. It's clear that France, if you look at fertility rate, the number of children in recent years, it's a society that has been a bit different than some other Europeans, having more kids, but at the same time giving more freedom perhaps to children, having less of, if you look at survey about the time use, for instance, that French parents feel less compelled to always be monitoring their children, you see those differences. Now, if you go to a playground in France or a playground in Britain or Spain, this is not the same. I think it would be dangerous to try to put any kind of causality there, but I'm sure that you are right that people will start asking themselves questions. The moment you want to put more emphasis on safeguarding, this means that you put more responsibility, more pressure on parents, on teachers, on people surrounding children, and that you make the job of parenting somehow much harsher, much more stressful. And this is something that, in a context of declining fertility, somehow it says it's a change of discourse. Children are very precious. We are willing to put a lot of resource in protecting them, but this means also, in a way, perhaps the end of innocence or the end of children roaming freely, which is something that is clearly a trade-off.
Renaud Foucart, Senior Lecturer in Economics at the Lancaster University Management School. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24 today.
Thank you.